just by reading it and imagining it, basically, it seemed that the obvious way to stage it would be a kind of in the round format, so that the performers were in a kind of naturalistic setup rather than in a kind of line. And that seemed to suit the space, the sort of three-sided space that we've been working in. The chairs that they're sitting on are further apart than they would be in a naturalistic setting, but I wanted that sense of them being able to, you know, look across the space at each other, interact with them in a kind of a more realistic environment rather than being in a kind of artificial lineup or anything like that. Yeah, and if one was staging the play fully, I think that's how you would do it. I think, I mean, what interesting thing kind of came out of today was, when I first read this play, I thought it was kind of absurd and that the meaning was quite difficult to grasp. But actually, once talking to David and working on it today, the whole thing in a way makes complete sense and is a lot more moving, I think, than I originally thought it was, and a lot more real in terms of the kind of emotions that are going on underneath it, even though stylistically it's quite heightened. No. Did they change their mind by the end of the day? I think because on paper it does feel difficult and absurd, but I think, you know, once you understand it, I mean, that's the whole point of rehearsal. Once you kind of delve into it and find out what's going on, then it kind of comes alive. But I think it's not an completely unusual situation to be in for a cast perhaps to not be fully sure of, or perhaps to like a script, but then to understand and to kind of start loving it through the rehearsal process. I think, you know, one of my jobs as a director is to be able to read a play with a sense of what it could be, in a way that perhaps an actor doesn't have to do. Well, I would, as I said, it feels more real, more naturalistic, more truthful, more rooted in a kind of an emotional truth, more profound, and ultimately quite a sad, moving piece. I needed the playwright to kind of unlock the meaning and the relationships. Yeah, and I think through that discussion and through discovering it with the actors, that came to the fore. Interestingly, the thing that most clicked with me was when he talked about Edward Albee, and particularly Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and suddenly actually the play made a lot of sense to me, that in fact the relationship between Ursula and Roy is very like Martha and George, and that whole setup of an older couple whose relationship is based on kind of lies and playing and intellectual games, inviting round another younger, more naive couple and kind of playing with them, toying with them. So the similarities in that kind of setup, and actually there are lots of similarities actually, because then you know, Albee and Virginia Woolf came from a kind of absurd 60s, 70s absurdist tradition, and this play, it feels to me, links back to that kind of tradition. David deliberately talks about Nathalie Sarraute, a French writer, 60s. So it feels that, you know, all those sort of influences have kind of come together. you know, I think the plays have all been as fantastic as we thought and hoped they would be, and I think that's really exciting. I think just to have those, that's such a wealth of strong texts is really exciting. I'm pleased too that the emphasis, from my point of view, has been on the text, you know, and we always talked about this process was about the writing, and I think because all the writers have delivered plays that are very heavily, they're kind of highly wrought. The writing is very thought about and is very specific, and you know, bearing in mind that we're in a situation where there can't be huge amounts of drama, that, you know, the concentration has to be on the words, and I think that's very exciting. That I feel that in a kind of world where text-based theatre is perhaps not as central as it used to be, and even though we're working in an environment that uses lots of different kinds of media and, you know, particularly new digital technology, still at the centre of it is the writer and the words, and that's what it's always been about. The inevitability and presence of death lurking under everyday life.